Hello, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Phoebe. How are you?
Great, great. Thank you for honoring our invitation. Hello, viewers. Today we have a very important person in our podcast today, and he's one of the leading executive coach in the industry. But let's see. Welcome everybody to Talk to Phoebe podcast. This is where leadership, innovation, business growth, and transformations come together through powerful conversation with top executive and entrepreneurs and industry leaders. I'm your host, Phoebe, and today episode is going to be challenging how we think about executive hiring, onboarding, and leadership success. Our guest today is Michael Burrow, executive recruiter, executive coach, executive integration specialist, keynote speaker, and an author of the acclaimed book Before Onboarding: How to Integrate New Leaders for Quick and Sustainable Results. Michael has spent decades leading in the industry, in the military, corporate America, healthcare leadership, and executive hiring, helping organizations around the world build stronger leaders and more successful executive transition. Michael, you're welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So before we go on, let me tell you how the podcast is gonna go. It's gonna go in three parts. First of all, we start with your background and the industry trend you're seeing. We discuss your current challenge and the vision you want your company in the next 1 year. And again, we finally wrap up if there's any step to take further than that. And again, I want to remind everybody and also you, it's a relaxed conversation. It's not an interview. We're looking at from what you can, from the intro, it's all about how you've got to where you are today, how you build the company, the network, and the success you have. What are the challenges you have, and what you're doubling down on. And again, of course, our leader, our audience will learn from you and what you are willing to share with us. Before we dive in, that's it. So, Michael, your career spanned military leadership, corporate leadership, executive recruiting, and coaching. What experience shaped your philosophy on the leadership the most?
And the military, Phoebe.
Yeah,
The military. And it's important that you mention leadership. And
yeah,
this was a big distinction for me.
yeah.
I was on active duty for 12 years,
Awesome.
and I left active duty. The last assignment that I had was I was the head of leadership instruction at the U.S. Army Academy of Health Sciences. And
Okay.
I was teaching other Army officers about leadership and professional ethics. And that got me very interested in the whole field of leadership development because up until that time, I had been a leader. I had commanded a couple of units. I was out there being a military leader. Then all of a sudden, now I'm teaching it.
Yeah.
And that was a great rounding out for me to do that. And it got me interested enough to want to do that in the private sector. And so when I left active duty, my first job out of the Army was an organization development executive with a Fortune 500 company. And then I did the same job for two other Fortune 500 companies. And within the roles of organization development vice president, I was responsible for leadership development, management development, and coaching the executive team. So, I got it in my blood
Yeah.
to do that. I really enjoyed it. And then when I left the corporate world, I became an executive recruiter for a top five global executive search firm.
So,
And I ended up being the managing director of the St. Louis office for that company. And I worked all industries. I did heavy manufacturing, aerospace, defense. I did financial services, healthcare, a lot of healthcare, higher education,
mm,
nonprofits. I had a blast because I was doing all of these searches in all of these different types of industries,
yeah.
which frankly was not what the Army prepared me to do. I hadn't worked in those fields. The three Fortune 500 companies I worked for were all health related industries.
Awesome.
So, now I'm doing things that were not healthcare and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So, in the course of working as that managing director for that search firm, and I did a couple of hundred searches for executives all over. Actually, I did searches outside the United States as well, in
Awesome.
Asia and Europe and Latin America. And I was an executive coach the entire time I was doing that. The firm that I worked for thought it was a good thing that I was an executive coach because I was basically adding value to my clients and I'd have a coaching client that could become an executive recruiting client. And it
Mm.
was just good for business for me to keep doing that. Plus, my real love is in coaching. I just
Okay.
I thoroughly enjoy doing that. But I had to develop, while I was an organization development executive in
Mhm.
the last job that I had to develop a process to integrate new leaders into their job
Awesome.
because we were losing external hires. We'd bring these people in, very expensive to bring them in, and they often didn't make it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what's causing the failure rate? And I thought, frankly, our company didn't do a very good job of selecting the right
We're gonna
people.
get there. Let's because I
I had nothing to do with that. I just watched them come in.
yeah.
I developed this process. I called it New Leader Integration.
Mm.
And it was designed to prepare the new leader for the job before they even showed up for work. That's why
Awesome.
the title of my book is Before Onboarding.
I didn't, yes.
Now, the process was very much a change management process. I interviewed the boss, all the peers of this new leader, and the direct reports, and I had a series of questions overlapping in many cases that I
Mm.
asked each of them. And that'd take 2 or 3 days to get through those interviews. And I would document all of my findings and
Awesome.
put together a process, a report I called a blueprint for success. I'd give it to the new incoming executive who hasn't even shown up for work yet.
Yeah.
And then we would meet for the better part of a day and go over that document line by line, page by page.
Yeah.
And I would tell them, look, I know more about your job right now than anybody because
Yeah.
I've talked to everybody
Yeah.
about your new job.
Yeah.
And I basically was preparing them for the first 90 days. And
Awesome.
then once they came on board, I was sort of with them as a coach,
Yeah.
throughout that 90-day period to make sure that all the things that were in the blueprint for success were in fact being followed. The
Awesome.
process worked so well that when I left the corporate world and became an executive recruiter, I pretty much shelved it. I mean, it really wasn't something that I did anymore.
Yeah.
And then one day I had a client, a very big client, I had lunch with this person, and she said she really liked that process. We were just talking about it over lunch.
Yeah.
And later she came back to me to do a search for a chief operating officer. And she said, but I want you to do that process that you told me about over lunch with this search. It's very important that
Hmm.
this person work out. The previous person was a train wreck, and
Wow.
we've got to get this thing right.
Yeah.
Would you do that for me? Would you do it? And I said, why not? So I did it. It made a tremendous difference in the outcome of that hire, and a
Mm.
new service was born. New
Hey,
leader integration in conjunction with an executive search.
awesome.
And then shortly after that, I wrote the book Before Onboarding,
Yeah.
and so which was published in 2011.
Yeah.
Other search consultants in our firm were doing the same thing,
Hmm.
and that service has been with me since 2011.
What lesson from your 29 years in the U.S. military still applies directly to leadership today?
Well, the military, Phoebe, is all about leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say all about it, I mean management. You obviously, as an Army officer, in my case, I was in the Army.
Yeah.
You manage, at every level, from platoon all the way up to as high as you go.
Yeah.
But leadership is the driving force in the military, and
Yeah.
leadership. And when I taught leadership, we emphasize leadership is an influencing process.
Yes.
Management is a controlling process.
Yes.
You control resources. You influence people. So
Yes.
there's a big difference between leadership and management.
Yes.
And so the military, because you had to ask people to do the impossible half the time, you had to influence them to do that.
It's
You're not going to drive them to do that.
Yeah.
If you want people to go above and beyond a call of duty, they've got to do it because they have confidence in their leader.
Yes.
And if the person's not a leader, they're not going to do it.
Awesome.
So I just that was ingrained in me the whole time I was on active duty. And so when I got into the private sector, I was surprised to find leadership was kind of in short supply in the
Yes.
private sector. Because most people that run organizations in the private sector, even if it's higher education or nonprofits or hospitals or
Mhm.
corporations, they're trained as managers. You go into an MBA program, it's all about management.
Yes.
And I learned that the hard way when I was an adjunct professor in an MBA program a few
Mhm.
years ago, when there were no leadership courses in the MBA program.
Yeah.
I taught it. I was the only leadership course, and it was an elective.
Wow.
So you could get through an MBA and not even take any leadership training.
Wow.
And then I got to looking into other MBA programs and realized while today more of them have a leadership course or two or three, but still it's heavily oriented towards management. So
Yeah.
the people that run private sector organizations are managers.
Mhm.
People that tend to run the military organizations are leaders
Mm.
and managers. And so my role as an executive coach now is to try to bring up that shortage of leadership and make the executives that I coach to be more balanced
Yeah,
between leadership and management.
it
And so
makes
that's what I learned in the military was
awesome.
leadership.
Yeah, that's very great. So looking back, what leadership lesson do you learn the hard way?
Well, let's say every time I failed at something, I
Yes.
learned a lesson from it, and the rule of thumb is that we tend to learn a lot more from our mistakes than
Yes.
we learn from our successes.
You're right.
And so I had a few, and usually they were involved with misjudging people, that I put too much confidence early in my career in people that just basically fooled me into thinking they were a lot better and more committed than they were.
Yeah.
And then I found out, early in my career that you gotta make sure people are competent and
Yeah.
committed in their job. And
Mm.
I didn't. I tended to early on in my career assume people just were whoever they said they were.
Yeah.
And I don't say I get in trouble for it, but I got embarrassed a few times because I put too much trust in the wrong people.
Yeah.
And so, I had to kind of recalibrate
Yeah.
that. So those were some hard lessons early on, but I learned them and I didn't make those mistakes again the longer I was in the military.
That's great. Awesome. So you've recruited executive globally across industry. What separates leaders from who interview well from leaders who actually succeed long term?
I think that what separates them is if they are leaders. I mean, if they come into an organization already leaders, whether they develop those skills they could develop them as a teenager. A lot of leadership is learned. A lot of people think leaders are born and not made. I disagree with that. I think people learn how to be a leader, over time. And a lot of us learn to be leaders when we're young. It might be the captain of a sports team or, the president of a club anything where you put in a leadership position as a young person, you might learn those skills. And so if they come into an organization already leaders, then they're going to separate. They're going to rise on the basis of that strength that they have coming in. The ones that don't rise are people who don't have that skill coming in, and they're lopsided. They're more managers than they are leaders. When often the thing that will determine the success or failure of an organization is influencing and the leadership side of it, not so much the management side. So when things are going wrong, people tend to double down on management, thinking they got to control more and more and more and direct more and more and more, when in fact they need to just inspire the people that are working for them to do more and more and more.
Yes. I agree. So why do so many executive hire fail even when the resume looks perfect?
Oh, well, resumes, I've only seen about 10,000 resumes in my career. I've seen some bad ones. If a lot of times organizations put too much confidence in a resume, frankly,
Yes.
and one of the ways I got around that as an executive recruiter and still do is I make sure that I know what my clients want this person to do.
Yes.
Not so much what they've done, on a resume, but what they are supposed to do. And so I put together a questionnaire. I routinely do this, and the people that I present to my clients, a slate of roughly 5 people that have made it through the screening process, they all fill out a questionnaire answering exactly the same questions. And those questions are future based. And it's what have you done in the past that mirrors what they're expecting of you in the future.
Mm.
Tell me what the situation was that you had to deal with.
Yeah.
How did it turn out based on what you personally did?
Yeah.
What was the outcome of that and how did it turn out? And what did you learn from the process? And then they answer 10, 12 questions like that. And now the people can match that questionnaire with the resume. And they can say, okay, well, now, we see what they've claimed to have done in the past. Now we see what they actually did in the past because they had to fill out that questionnaire. And we can do a better job of projecting what they're likely to do in the future that we want to have done. And that tool is highly respected by my clients. They love it.
All right. Awesome. So what organizations still getting wrong about executive recruiting?
What do they get wrong about
Yeah.
executive recruiting? I think, boy, this is systemic. The answer that I'm about to give you deals with systemic. I think too many organizations today are relying on internal recruiters to recruit their senior people,
Mm.
and not because they think they're saving money.
Yes.
If we hire 2 or 3 internal recruiters And I'm not saying that's a bad, some of them are really great at what they do, but systemically, I think they're better off if they get a good external retained executive recruiter because the process is very thorough. The vetting is very thorough. We go through dozens and dozens of potential candidates to get to a slate of 5 that in my case, that I present to my clients. And the companies that don't do that and don't rely on that, they end up getting candidates, frankly, that have not been vetted nearly as well. I think that's what they get wrong in the selection process.
Yes.
What they get wrong overall is they do not integrate anybody.
Okay.
And the integration is the thing that's going to deter. Assuming the right person was hired, integration will make or break.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna get that after this question. So, how important is cultural fit versus technical competence?
Well, I think technical competence, Phoebe, is easier to verify
Yes.
than whether you're a cultural fit.
Yes.
And that's my job. It's kind of where coaching falls into this category because often people get derailed in their jobs because of a lack of cultural adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say cultural fit. And I think that people put too much emphasis when they're bringing a new executive in on their technical competence because often the people that are selecting them are technically competent and they put a halo around what this person knows technically to the detriment of what really is involved in an executive job, which is influencing other people. Whether it's influencing your peers, influencing your boss, or influencing the people that work for you. So I think that they tend to put more emphasis on a person's functional and technical expertise and not enough on their cultural fit.
Awesome. So let's get to the next question. Your book is titled Before Onboarding. Why is integration more important than onboarding?
I don't think that it's more important. I think they each have their own role.
Okay.
Everybody in a progressive organization gets onboarded.
Okay.
Everybody, doesn't matter what your level. And the whole idea is to get this person acclimated and into the organization as quickly as possible.
All right.
But if you're an executive coming in and you're running things, then integration is essential because now the cost of bringing that person in is tremendously high for starters. It takes many months often to bring in that person.
Yes.
And if that individual doesn't work out, and sadly, the failure rate's anywhere between 30 and 50% of senior outside hires, and they usually are gone within 18 months, that 30%.
Yes.
And so that's incredibly expensive to have that problem.
Yes.
So integration is different and important in its own way. I think it's more important to the success of the individual and the success of the organization if an executive is properly integrated into that role. The first 90 days are critical for everybody.
I'm going to get to that one too. So what happens in an organization where leaders aren't integrated correctly?
What happens when it's not done correctly?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, frankly, Phoebe, it's more often that it's not done at all. It's not that they poorly integrate people. They don't even think about integrating them.
Okay.
They just bring them in, and there's a kind of a mentality, certainly in this country, that if you're a senior executive, you assume that any new incoming senior executive is ready-made talent.
Yeah.
Everything they've done in the past, they're just going to transfer into this new job. And so they don't tend to manage them. They don't tend to influence them. They don't spend a lot of time directing what this person needs to do to be successful in the short term, because that first 90 days is critical.
Yeah.
It's a sink or swim mentality. And often they sink and they don't swim.
Yeah.
They really do, at every level, need to have a proper integration process done, and they don't do it. The problem is not that they do it ineffectively, they just don't do it.
Okay, I agree. So what are the critical first 90 days for a new executive?
What
Critical first 90 days for a new executive?
Well, why are they critical? Those first 90 days? I think, frankly, Phoebe, the research has pointed that out. The first book that was ever written on integrating new leaders was a book called The First 90 Days.
Okay.
And the author of that book is a professor at Harvard Business School named Michael Watkins. And that book is read by everybody, But the problem I have with the book, and I don't have a problem, it's a great book. It's a self-directed integration process.
Okay.
You read this book after you start. Now do these things while you're there. Well, you know, if you've had a new job, you're in the first few months of your job, you're drinking water through a fire hose. You know, you don't have time to properly integrate yourself, which is why my process begins before they start. And so when they get there, they've got this roadmap. I call it a blueprint,
Yeah.
ready made. And so the research that Watkins did said the failure rates were often tracked back to the first 90 days. The things they did well or failed to do in the first 90 days resulted in their being gone 18 months to 2 years later, or there and succeeding quite well.
So, what warning sign tells you a leader's transition may fail?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I haven't been asked that. I've done a lot of these podcasts. No one's ever asked me that question. That's a good question. What are the warning signs? Well, everybody's got their own warning signs that they're looking for. I think one of the ones that I have seen is when when there's several. First of all, results aren't happening.
Yes.
That's the first warning sign. People come in and they expect them to do A, B, and C, and they're 3-4 months down the road and nothing's really happened on those critical things. The problem is they didn't necessarily tell them they were critical things. They just expect them to know they're critical things. And so if the objectives are not being met, then people start to observe that and talk about it. Another thing is when there's a clash of personalities. You know, when people don't trust this new person that's come in, or there's a personality conflict with another key individual, and now there's grumbling among the ranks of this person's not fitting in here, and it's not just not being liked. It may also be not being trusted, not being respected, you know, and so that starts to be talked about. And when those two things happen, then you know you got to intervene. And that's where an executive coach is very valuable to come in and smooth that out, you know.
That's great. So, how can organizations accelerate trust and alignment for new leaders?
Oh, that's good. My process. Well, if they're integrating the individual and they're using my process in my book before onboarding, I have a step that's critical to establishing trust. And first of all, by the process consultant, in this case me, interviewing all these people, the boss, every peer, every direct report, the questions that I'm asking are already helping develop trust, because now the person that I'm interviewing knows they're able to communicate to me the things that are important for that new leader to know. So they're saying, okay, communication is open, and that kind of elevates the trust level a little bit. The people that have the hardest time trusting the new leader are the people that work for that person. And I have a process. One of the questions I ask every direct report of a new leader is, what is one thing you want to know about this new leader that individual will never know you asked the question. It'll be anonymous. And guess what? On the morning of that individual's first day, I'm calling all of you together in a conference room, and the new leader is going to stand up and answer all of your anonymous questions in person. Before 10 o'clock in the morning, those questions get answered. And I know those questions. And when I meet with the new leader to do the blueprint overview, I say, hey, guess what? On the morning of the first day, you got to answer these questions. Let's look at them. And they look at him and say, oh my God, that's a tough question. I'll say, yeah, it is. And you got to answer it. And you got to answer it with authenticity. You got to answer it credibly. Because this is your one opportunity to gain their trust. You know, if they think you're waffling on that answer, then they're going to think that you just can't be trusted. And it'll take weeks, if not months, to try to develop that trust. So once we go through that process and they've answered those questions, then we break for a donut or something, and then we sit back down, and I have the new leader talk to them, pull up a chair, and say, okay, here are 5 things that Michael Burroughs pointed out, said that you guys commented on in the interviews that I need to tackle in the first 30, 45 days I'm here. Tell me about them. What is it about this problem? What is it about that problem? And now they'll talk. They haven't even had lunch yet, and they'll talk, because that first hour and a half was spent developing, credibility and trust. And that's the best single process I have within the whole system of new leader integration, is that morning meeting of the first day they're on the job.
I think it's very magical. I can see.
Yeah, it is very tough, and it works.
It works. Okay, you specialize in physician leadership and emergency department executive. What makes healthcare leadership uniquely difficult?
I think what makes healthcare leadership difficult, there's several things. One is the costs of failure are so high. We're talking about people's lives at the top of the food chain and their health below that. And the customers of physician leaders are highly emotional about their situation. You know, their expectations are very high. What makes it challenging, and I've seen this repeatedly in my career, is physicians who are put in leadership positions did not train and develop as leaders. They trained and developed as clinicians. And they may be leading a team of like 2 or 3 people, you know, and delivering patient care around the bedside, but running a department, you know, and my subspecialty within that is emergency rooms.
Yeah.
I have developed and coached hundreds of ER directors. And so now you're talking about a person that leads a department of 75 to 150 people running, depending on the size of the hospital. And that is a critical place to work, and it operates 24 hours a day. And so if those physicians, and I'm talking physicians here, and the nurses that also are director level nurses, if they don't have their game tied up, then things fall apart.
Yeah.
And so it's very important that I shore them up. And that's why executive coaching is so important for physician leaders, because they don't have any other way to develop, you know, and one-on-one working with them as a coach is the best way to round them out as leaders.
That's very great. Why do many brilliant physicians struggle when moving into leadership roles?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what I just said, a lack of preparation.
Yeah.
You know, often they're chosen to be the department chair, let's say. Let's say the hospital CEO or the chief medical officer says, you know, so-and-so just retired and we need a new director of the Department of Surgery. How about you, Dr. Smith? You know, we think you'd make a good director or chief of the Department of Surgery. You willing to take the job? And then they said, well, I guess, you know, okay. And think about it. This is a person that people instinctively feel like this individual might do a good job.
Yeah.
And they put him in it with no preparation, just and no supervision really as in a leadership role. So, I mean, think about it. Imagine yourself in that situation. That's the ultimate challenge because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's why I'm specializing in that now at this stage of my career. I didn't do that for 20 years. I mean, I did some of it, but now I'm really focused on that because I kind of want that to be my legacy. I'd like to see new leader integration really be involved with physicians coming into these new jobs because the stakes are so high for them.
So, as an executive coach, what blind spots do you consistently see among senior leaders?
Blind spots.
Yes.
I think a lot of this, the blind spot that I see the most, and this comes through coaching more than anything else, is when I'm dealing with executives who are very direct in their style. I use a tool called DISC. You know, some of your listeners will be very familiar with that. And roughly 70% of senior executives are dominant. Their temperament is a dominant temperament, and they value their time exceedingly. You know, highly value their time. And they're multitasking, and the more they get done in the course of a day, the better they like it.
Yeah.
So what happens often is they're multitasking when they should be listening to someone. You've had this happen, I'm sure, when you've walked into one of these type of people's office, you want to talk to them about something. They're looking at their computer screen. They're waiting for a text to come through on their phone. You know, their minds are in 3 different places, and yet at the same time, they're trying to listen to you. And they think they're doing an effective job of listening to you, and they're not. And when I do my coaching work and I find what does this person need to do more of and less of, almost exclusively they tell me, I just want, when I'm in that person's office, if I got something to talk about, I want them to put their phone down, look away from their computer, look me in the eye, and listen to what I have to say. And it's often a blind spot for these people because they claim they don't know they do that. I think they do know they do that, and I find that out. They just think it doesn't matter because I'm in charge, and these people just have to put up with it. Well, they don't have to put up with it.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest blind spot I see is not giving people their undivided attention when they're in a one-on-one situation.
Wow, that's great. So, how can great leaders succeed inside broken culture?
Well, it depends on how much influence they have. If they have the ability to control, I don't like the word control, but if they're leaders, they're influencers. If they're managers, they're controllers. If they're a balance, they may have to do some controlling and some influencing.
Yeah.
But if they have the position power
Yes.
to come in automatically to do that kind of work, now position power gets them only so far. Then they have to have personal power on top of that. They have to be so effective at managing and leading that people just naturally gravitate to what they have to say. And here's a kind of a truism that I've run into a lot. Everybody likes to be led. Few of us like to be managed, if anybody, because management's controlling. And think about people who overmanage. They're micromanage. I mean, it's all negative terms when somebody is managed too much. But everybody likes to be led. Everybody wants to follow a person they admire and respect. And so I think those are the two distinctions right there.
That's very great. So how much does organizational culture determine leadership success?
I think it makes it easy for an incoming leader if they understand the culture, which they tend not to understand unless I integrate them. But the more they know about an organizational culture coming in, and the more versatile they are about adapting to that culture, then knowledge is power. If they come in and say, okay, well, in this place, we communicate this way, or we do this and we don't do that. In my previous organization, it was just the opposite. So if they come in forewarned, they are forearmed, as we say. And so that's where knowledge is power. And that's why the integration process is so important, because I really stress cultural fit, when I'm bringing a new leader into an organization.
That's great. So what separates leaders who grow from leaders who plateau?
There was a book written in the 60s, Phoebe, probably before your time, called The Peter Principle. Are you familiar with that term?
I think I've heard that, but I've never...
Okay, well, the Peter Principle basically is this. We all rise to our level of incompetence. Sooner or later, we're going to reach a point where we don't know what we're doing. And so that whole thing was about promoting people before their time. You put them into a job where now they're incompetent, where before in the previous job they were very competent. So that's a problem when you put leaders into a role that they're not prepared for. I mean, they're not competent prepared for. That's organizations have to really be careful about putting people in a situation that is beyond their capability.
Yeah.
All of it, really good leaders and managers want to be challenged. We all want that. Stretch me. They like the stretch goals, but there's a difference between having stretch goals and being put in a hopeless situation when you're totally incompetent to do the job.
Yeah.
And people figure that out rather quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's great. So how do you see AI reshaping executive recruiting?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, but we are all learning at the same time.
Yeah.
One of the things that where AI is being used the most, I think, in executive recruiting right now is for the people at the professional recruiter level, at retained executive search firms, is they're able to do more research on their candidate. You can go into, say ChatGPT or something and find out things that go beyond Google, and you can quickly get information that you need. You can quickly get information about the organization that you're working for. You can quickly find out about the organization the candidate previously worked for. You can just gather lots of data to help you make a better decision. That's in the back room of an executive recruiter's office. What I'm using AI for right now, I'm trying to get able to have conversations with hospital CEOs, about the importance of integrating their physician leaders. So I'm having to use some of the same AI tools to generate communication to people who I want to talk to about this process.
Okay, so what are the tools you're using to get this conversation going?
Well, I'm new at it. This is just beginning. On the scalability. I have dedicated this year, 2026, to rebranding our firm to where integration is going to become a key part of it, and re-engineering how we develop clients. And so I'm piloting that in Sheer Velocity, which is the firm that I work for. And we just got started. I've only been at that 2 weeks.
Okay, that's
so we're in the second quarter now, and my plan was by second quarter we would start executing and rolling that out. I had to pick an AI expert like yourself who can do that for me, and I've talked to many, and I've studied. Well, I narrowed it down to an individual, frankly, who's doing a very good job with me. And one of the things I really liked about that person, frankly, was he happens to be Canadian. He said, "Look, I want to share in your success."
Yes.
Long story short, I'm doing revenue sharing with him.
Okay.
So every client that comes to me as a result of this AI generated process that he has engineered for me, I'll share the winnings with him. So he says that gives. So to me, I'm an entrepreneur for 25 years. He's got skin in the game, we say, and so that's been a real differentiator as to who I have picked, who have that expertise, because frankly, all of you have that expertise to some degree or another. I
Yeah.
just happened to click with him on that basis because his values and my values were really well aligned. And it's working. We're just, like I say, though, we just got started.
Okay, that's fine. So more or less he's generating leads for you, right? For you to work with?
Well, he's good to work. We talk weekly about. I mean, he's managing the process for me,
Okay.
and I have to execute. And he's the back wheel of the bicycle, and I'm the front wheel of the bicycle.
Makes sense, and that's a great partnership. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So where do you want share velocity to be in the next 1 year?
Where do I want to be in 1 year?
Mm-hmm.
My plan, and this is I'm a soldier, so planning is very important.
Yes.
I'm rolling out a scalability drive in our firm
Mm-hmm.
so that business development will be significantly enhanced through the use of AI tools,
Yeah.
so that I can perfect this process and then roll it out to the other consultants that work for our firm, so
Okay.
that by 2027, this time next year, my business will have increased and other people in our firm will be benefiting from that and their own business will
Yeah.
be increased. The firm will grow as a result of the success of this pilot project we're doing right now.
Yeah.
A
You know
year
what?
from now, I'm giving myself till about this time next year to see those results really showing.
Yeah, that's awesome. But another thing I want to point out again is that most time when people use AI tools, yes, it gives you productivity, it boosts your productivity, but it doesn't equate to automating your process. And it doesn't also equate to transforming your business because
Right.
using the tool is not enough. The tools are like the building blocks. When you now
Yeah.
automate your process like the architect, and when you now want the process to run independent of you, that's where the transformation comes in. But anyway, that is by the way.
Yeah. Well, AI is a productivity improvement tool, and I know one of the issues that I've talked about even on other podcasts is that leadership is even more of a challenge in an organization the
Yes,
more they adopt AI.
yes,
Because the managers who run the organization are looking for productivity improvements, efficiency, which often equates to fewer people.
mm,
And if leadership is an influencing process, you don't want to be treating people like they're a round peg in a round hole, and
yeah,
you can just take them out of the hole and dismiss them, and now you're making more money.
yeah,
So that's I happen to have a real issue with that, and
yeah,
I've jokingly said on a couple of podcasts one of my new roles going forward is I would like to be brought in as a leadership consultant in organizations that are implementing AI,
yeah.
so that they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in
Yeah,
doing it.
yeah. I understand what you're saying because one of the problem is that most of the time they don't do right AI audits.
Right.
And they implement it in the wrong thing instead of implementing for the process for the outcome.
Yeah.
It's just another. They don't do their housework well, or they don't even do it at all. They just feel, oh, AI, they jump into it. You have to know where exactly you need to implement the process to have the best outcome you're looking for. Anyway, that's by the way.
Well, one of the things that I think, and I can't prove this, but I
Yeah.
think what's happening is a lot of organizations implementing AI are sort of discovering what to do as they go. And that's why I said I would like to come in and
Mhm.
work with them while they're implementing AI so that they realize there's a humongous people effect to everything that they're doing. And,
But
and
it's
a
also
lot of things, a
so
lot of times they just get so enamored with the productivity improvements that whole people concept piece of it gets put on the shelf to make sure that AI reaches its full potential, but yet people can reach their full potential too.
absolutely, absolutely. The thing that most of them don't do the AI audit to know the exact place to implement it. It's
Yeah.
not one off and it's not something implementing does not guarantee a productivity, or what the outcome you're looking for. It's being tied to the process you're looking for or where
Mhm.
you want the transformation to be. Anyway, let me not just so okay, let me ask you another one. Is there any specific KPIs you're tracking to make sure that this, you say focusing is to make sure you have more conversation with the hospitals so that we can coach, stuff like that. Is there any KPIs you're tracking to make sure you're in the right path?
Well, Phoebe, I only have so much bandwidth. I
Okay.
mean, I have to execute everything that I sell.
Yes.
So at this stage of my career, which I'm on the tail end of it, I
Yeah.
want to maximize every day. I have a reason for waking up every day. And I know that if I can go into a healthcare organization and make them better through my skills that I bring to that organization, people's health will be affected by that.
Yes.
So I'm very focused on healthcare because I just believe it is the most intense organization that I can go into and
Mm.
have an effect that has a lasting effect in very positive ways.
Mm.
And so I'm laser focused on that field right now. I wasn't always that way, but right now I know that I can make an impact and am making an impact. And I've got all this experience in that field. So as I ride out the rest of my career, I want my legacy to be new
Yeah.
leader integration done with physician leaders as often as it can be done.
Yeah. I really like that because you're being very laser focused and specific, which is very good. So if you have a magic wand to fix just one thing in sheer velocity that is holding you back or slowing you down, what would that one thing be?
The one thing for what, please?
So if you have a magic wand to fix just one thing in your
Okay.
company that is holding you back or slowing you down, what would that one thing be?
I think the one thing that would help me right now would be to spend less time developing clients. Just that's it, because the execution phase of an executive search or an executive coaching project or an integration project is time consuming. And it takes, and like I say, I only have so much bandwidth. You're talking about me now, me as an individual.
Sure.
So the one thing that could help me a lot is that I know this sounds kind of trite, but I'd like to be getting clients while I sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, that AI can reach out to them
Oh,
in
yeah.
ways that I don't have to be sitting there intensively managing the communication
It's
process to
possible.
just get to have a conversation with these
Yes,
people.
it's
I
possible.
want AI to generate the conversations to bring them to me so that they now know that talking to me is valuable to them.
Yes.
And I've had several of you, frankly, tell me I ought to have my own podcast. That the best way to get to have a conversation with these people is to invite them on my podcast. And frankly, I'm seriously considering doing that.
That's awesome. So, okay, let's a rapid roundup questions. I think we've really had a good time talking to you. So, one trait every executive leadership must have. One trait every executive leader must have.
What trait every leader must have?
Yeah, executive leader.
I would say, okay, there's several. One of them, I think, is the ability to adapt to change. I think that I have seen more people get derailed in their careers because they're just stuck in the present or even stuck in the past.
Mm.
And change is rapidly happening, as you well know. I mean, we're drowning in change, and a new leader who cannot adapt to change is doomed.
Yes.
And I mean adapt to it ahead of the curve,
Yeah.
not chasing it. So that causes the demise of quite a few people. Sadly, it really does.
Awesome. It makes sense. So, biggest leadership mistake. Biggest leadership mistake.
The biggest leadership mistake,
Yes, sir.
I would say, a leadership mistake
Yes.
is forgetting the importance of influencing people. If I say a leadership mistake means they start to gravitate more emphasis on management and less on the importance of developing and growing and coaching and counseling their employees and also grooming leaders for tomorrow. I
Yes.
think it's a responsibility of every leader to groom their replacement.
Yeah.
I mean, the private sector doesn't see it that way because that person can become a threat to the individual grooming them. When I was in the Army as a company commander, I had 3 officers that worked for me, my subordinate officers, and I called them in one day and I said, the executive officer, the next thing in line, I said, I could be taken out tomorrow, and guess what? You're in command. The second that happens, you're in command. And if this guy gets taken out a week later, you're in command.
Yes.
And these people looked at me like, oh my God, we thought you would always be in command. I said, well, I hope so, because I don't want to get hurt or killed. But, it can happen suddenly that you have to take charge. So my role was to develop them along the way to be able to step into my role if something were to happen to me. And that's the value that was embedded in me and every Army officer is that you got to groom your replacement. And that's a big part of your job. And I don't see that happening so much in the private sector.
Wow.
People groom themselves, or they have to groom themselves, and rarely do people step in to develop somebody. You got to really want to develop someone. I mean, and that mentorship relationship is not something you can impose. It
Yeah.
has to be something that just happens.
Awesome. It's great. So one word that defines great leadership. One word that defines great leadership.
Selflessness. Selflessness.
Yeah. Awesome.
That you put your people ahead of yourself. That's and when followers know that their leader has their back, will put themselves, will take responsibility for something that they failed to do and not blame that person in public.
Mm.
That devoted to the people that work for them, that's the one thing that will just take them to the stratosphere. If people know they've got, my boss has my back.
Awesome. So,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to every new executive stepping into a leadership role today?
Oh my God, I feel sorry for them if they're not being integrated. I think one thing, read my book. That would probably be before they're looking for a new job.
Yeah.
That says your question was before they step into a new job.
Yes.
I think they need to understand before they even go looking for a new job how important integration is. And I have had people call me who have read my book and they're not being integrated. They just said, I'm looking at a new job right now that they're getting on their own. And they said, the questions that are in your book are questions I need to be asking the people that are considering hiring me. And I would have never known to ask that if I hadn't read it in your book. So actually, my book has some value to people who are looking for a new job. But the best solution for these new executives is hope the organization invests in a new leader integration process. And if they don't, sadly, they got to figure it out themselves. And I think the sooner they start looking into that, the better. And my book is before onboarding is a good place to start. It's not the only place. And the other thing I would say is get an executive coach
Yes.
early in your career, even if you have to pay that coach out of your own pocket. People at that level can afford it.
Yeah.
You need a coach. And
Awesome.
I've worked with people who paid me themselves,
Yeah.
and their peers look around and say, wow, that individual really cares about doing a good job because he or she has bought or hired a coach to come and help them be successful.
Awesome.
That's another piece of advice. So
That's very good. So, after a decade of leadership experience, what does great leadership mean to you now?
I think great leadership to me now means that we will continue to. I'm an American, obviously. I care about the future of our country, and I think that the biggest issue that I have with leadership is they're in short supply,
Yes.
and that what matters to me is that more leaders are put in positions of responsibility so that the organization can grow, the community can grow, the country can grow, and we're not going to grow when there are no leaders.
Yes.
Leaders will make growth happen because people follow them and want to excel. And we just need more leaders, more leaders.
Michael, in fact, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for sharing your insight and leadership wisdom with us today. And one thing that is clear from this conversation is that leadership success isn't just about hiring great people, it's about integrating them intentionally into culture, relationship, and strategy. Thank you very much, Michael, and we really appreciate your time.
Well, Phoebe, I'm really glad we finally connected and got to
Yeah,
do this. Thank you so much for the invitation.
thank you very much. So, viewers, this is where we draw the curtain today. At the end of when we post the video, I'm going to put Michael's information on the drop description box. So if you want to get across to him about all the great things he's shared today, feel free. I'm going to put his LinkedIn, his website, and possibly his phone number if he allows me, if that's okay, in the description box so that you can get across to him and ask him your question, or possibly, of course, his services. And I know from what you've shared, there are things that we never really thought about, just like I will say that to myself. And it's an eye-opening, and I make sure that I'll still get back to him and learn more. Thank you, Michael.
Okay,
And
thank you, Phoebe.
thank
Thank
you,
you again.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. All right.